sewing in the middle of the night. I just hopped out of bed. You see, I'm not fixed by any means, but I couldn't sleep, and so Charlie, I didn't hop out of bed, that's a lie. Charlie kicked me out of bed since I couldn't sleep, and I was just like jibber-jabbering and whatever, and he was trying to sleep. So he kicked me out of bed, and I am going to be sewing until I'm too tired to stay awake. That's the solution to not being able to sleep in my book. So I'm going to be sewing this little Smocked thingamajigger, and I think I'll have the pattern on my website for free download, so y'all are able to download that and make it with me. I hope you have fun with the tutorial. I am tired, but I can't sleep. You know why I can't sleep? Because somebody on the Instagrams, I believe her name was Allison, posted a picture of the smock bishop that she made using my tutorial, and it just was like, oh my goodness, somebody, like it was helpful to somebody. I got so excited that somebody found that helpful. It was just like, I just kept talking Charlie's ear off about it, and he was like, go sew. Leave me alone. I have to sleep.
Alright, and so if you make anything using my tutorials, I would love it if you send a picture. I've gotten a couple pictures from other people, and it has just made my day. And so getting back to this tutorial, once you cut out all your pattern pieces, then you want to go over your pleater and put your needles on line. I didn't use any half spaces for the front of the garment, I only used half spaces for the sleeves. So here I'm aligning 12 needles, which will give me 2 holding rows, and then I'm rolling up one of the rectangles so I can put it through the pleater. And then I'm pulling 2 inches out from one of the sides, and then once you have the 2 inches pulled out, count 32 pleats over, and then pull out the rest of those pleats. And then I tied the threads in groups of 2. Once that was done, I gave it a good ironing. So then you're going to align that front template on this pattern, and you notice how I have the pleated section on that shoulder. You just align it some flavor of that, and then you're going to use the template to cut out that shape. So then you're going to use French seams at the top of those shoulders, and I have a tutorial on how to do French seams. Once that is done, I take the button bands and I iron them in half, and then I ironed one of the sides to that half line. So you basically have a quarter, and then you got your half, and you have the rest of the button band. And on the half that hasn't been ironed, just stitch your lace there. It's about 1/2 inch over from the raw edge. I'm just using a straight stitch to secure the lace. And then you're going to create a little sandwich with this button band in the front of your garment. So you'll fold that lace over to complete the sandwich, and then you'll just straight stitch right along that lace header. And I'm using 80 weight thread so it'll barely show. Then iron that down and do the same thing to the other side.
So it is now 2 in the morning, and I am sufficiently tired. I've made this much progress. I need to do the sleeves, and then the hem, and the buttons, and then it's done. Well, and the neckline, and then it's done minus the smocking and whatever embroidery I want to do. It'll just uber-duper fun part for me. But I'm gonna hit the hay for tonight because, like I said, it's 2 in the morning, so I will finish this another time. Alright, so it is a couple days later. I am wide awake, and I finished up the smocking and embroidery work on here. I've also rearranged my sewing a little bit, so I am ready to get going and finish up this gown.
Alright, and to continue on, I am pleating up the sleeves. I'm using 6 half spaces to pleat the sleeves up. That'll give me 2 holding rows. So once the sleeves are pleated up, I pulled enough fabric out so I could lay the sleeve flat again, and then I joined the lace to the raw edge of the sleeve using a zigzag. And then I put 2 gather rows on the top of the sleeve, 1 gather row on each side of where that permanent seam is going to go. Then I pulled out the threads from about 1.25 inches on each side of those raw edges, and then tied them in groups of 2s. I repeated the same thing to the other side, and then I just gathered the pleats up to my likings. And then I started to gather the top of the sleeves, and this is what you'll have. Then I pinned the top of the sleeve the right sides together onto the garment, and I started by pinning the outside of the sleeve to the outside of the garment, and in the middle of the sleeve to that shoulder seam, and then I sort of just filled in the gaps, adjusting the gathers as needed. And I straight stitched the sleeve onto the armhole, and then I pulled out that top gather thread, and once I trimmed up the edges, this is what it looked like. Then I took it back to my machine to do a zigzag to enclose those raw edges. Then you're going to want to press the seam of that sleeve towards the sleeve. That way it'll support the poofy sleeve. If you press it the other direction, the poofy sleeve will just sort of fall flat. And then I went to do French seams on the side. Again, I have a tutorial for that. You want to make sure when you do the French seams on the side that you keep the sleeve seams facing towards the sleeve and away from the garment. And you just do your French seam. Now I do start the second round of the French seam at the bottom of the garment. I will never start the second round of the French seam with lace. It just doesn't work well for me. And from here I'm doing the neckband. I'm just folding it in half and ironing down the middle. So I have those raw edges together there. Taking the raw edges and I'm kneading those towards the raw edges of that neckband. Then I'm leaving about a 1/2 inch overhang, putting that in place and going to stitch that down. And so then I'm trimming that up to the point that when the neckband folds over to the other side, it'll be flush with the stitches, which will make more sense when I show you how I stitch that down. So I'm ironing that over. And then the last thing to do on this little gown is the hem. And at this point I've been handled so much that I had a whole bunch of little stray threads on the bottom of the hem, so I'm just giving that a little bit of a haircut. And then I am putting the lace down at the bottom with a little bit of overhang. That way I can take that raw edge of the lace and hand stitch it in place later. And to join the lace to the raw edge of the hem, I'm just using a zigzag. So here you can see I folded over the lace twice, that way the raw edge of the lace is enclosed, and then I'm hand stitching that in place using some whip stitches. I'm also whip stitching the top of the neck binding in place. You can see I'm going from the stitches to the top of the neckband. I'm bypassing the folded part of the neckband. I'm not putting my stitches through there, and that helps to make it more of a clean finish. And once you get all done with that, this is the little finished garment. I think this garment could be like a dress for a newborn or a 3-month-old, but I also think it could be a diaper shirt for an older child. And I finished the center of the garment with hand buttonholes, but you could have done machine buttonholes if you wanted to, or you could have done snaps, whatever floats your boat. I also have videos on all of those methods. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. As always, we appreciate y'all for watching, and we will catch y'all next time.